Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the profound, complex, and honestly slightly tragic true story of Mehran Karimi Nasseri. You probably know him, right? The stateless man who famously lived inside a single Paris airport terminal for 18 agonizingly long years. This is a story about borders, the absolute terror of modern bureaucracy, and the incredible lengths the human mind will go to just to survive extreme public isolation. Let's get right into it.
Here's our quick roadmap. We're going to start by untangling the Hollywood myth from the reality, unpack the legal limbo that trapped him in the first place, look at his daily life on a red plastic bench, explore his deeply mysterious psychology, and then finally trace his tragic return home.
Section 1. The Hollywood Myth, Separating Fact from Cinematic Fiction. Let's start with what most people probably already know, or at least think they know, about this incredibly bizarre situation. I'm talking about the famous 2004 Steven Spielberg movie starring Tom Hanks. In the film The Terminal, Tom Hanks plays Victor Navorsky. He's a fictional tourist whose home country undergoes a violent coup while he's mid-flight, basically rendering his passport invalid and trapping him at JFK in New York. And in true Hollywood fashion, it's this lighthearted, feel-good comedy. Victor builds water fountains, he plays matchmaker, he even finds romance with a beautiful flight attendant. But the real inspiration for that movie, Mehran Karimi Nasseri, lived a much stranger and frankly significantly sadder reality. His story wasn't some brief comedic mishap neatly wrapped up in 2 hours. No way. It was a literal 18-year saga of severe psychological isolation, existing essentially as a ghost, right in the middle of one of the busiest transit hubs on the planet. Get this, DreamWorks actually paid roughly $250,000 to Nasseri for the rights to his life story. But here is the truly bizarre twist. Even though his life was the core inspiration for a major Hollywood blockbuster, he was never even named in the film's official publicity materials. Plus, the movie's storyline bore almost zero resemblance to his actual day-to-day existence. And, what does a man confined to an airport even do with $250,000? He didn't buy his way out, he actually couldn't. Much of that money just sat untouched in an airport post office account, a literal fortune completely useless to a man who legally could not step outside to spend it. Moving on to Section 2, Trapped in Legal Limbo. How do you get stuck in an airport? Because understanding how a human being gets legally trapped for nearly 2 decades between a pizzeria and a duty-free electronics store requires a really quick lesson in international law. So the crucial point here is statelessness. Without a recognized identity on paper, you become an absolute phantom to the global system, trapped indefinitely in these international transit zones. Modern society is entirely dictated by borders, right? Rigid, uncompromising lines drawn on maps, enforced by customs agents with ink stamps. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights asserts that everyone has a right to a nationality. But the terrifying reality is that when your paperwork vanishes, your legal existence basically vanishes right along with it. You are physically standing in a room, breathing the air, but legally, you are nowhere at all. It was this absolute cascade of unbelievable bureaucratic failures over the years that led to his permanent confinement in Charles de Gaulle's Terminal 1. He'd actually studied in the UK, returned to Iran, and subsequently claimed he was expelled for protesting against the Shah back in 1977. So after bouncing around Europe for a bit, Belgium formally grants him refugee status in 1981. Things are looking up. But then, in 1988, while transiting through Paris on his way to the UK, the unimaginable happens. His briefcase, the one containing his refugee certificate, goes missing at a train station. And to this day, it remains a total mystery whether it was stolen by a mugger or actually if he discarded it himself in a sudden moment of panic. Either way, losing that single piece of paper effectively derailed the entire rest of his life. The trap snapped shut in a really devastating sequence of events. Thinking he could just, explain his situation, he boards a flight to London anyway. But because he lacked those physical papers, immigration officials in the UK flatly denied him entry and bounced him right back on a plane to France. Now, just imagine stepping off that return flight. Once he was back at Charles de Gaulle, he couldn't leave. If he stepped out of the transit zone and onto actual French soil, he'd be arrested immediately for illegal entry. He was basically an unwanted human parcel with no return address. This administrative nightmare eventually led to one of the most unbelievable legal paradoxes in modern history, the ultimate catch-22. In 1992, a French court officially ruled on his case, and the verdict? The judge declared that he had originally entered the airport legally as a recognized refugee, meaning the authorities couldn't forcefully throw him out of the building. However, and this is the crazy part, because he lacked a passport or a French visa, he couldn't legally leave the building either. It was an invisible cage.
He was perfectly legal to sit on a plastic bench, but entirely illegal to walk out the front sliding glass doors and touch the sidewalk. Absolutely wild.
Section 3. Life on a red bench. Designing a world in Terminal 1. We really have to ask ourselves here, what is it actually like to live on two red plastic benches pushed together for nearly 2 decades? Being trapped meant his life completely lacked any natural structure. So, what did he do? He created a fiercely rigid daily routine to maintain his dignity and, honestly, his sanity among the endless flow of rushing travelers. He didn't just survive in Terminal 1. He built a whole micro-world for himself. I mean, think about it. The sensory experience alone must have been completely exhausting. You've got those relentless fluorescent lights that hum endlessly and never actually turn off, the constant echoing boarding announcements. To cope, he'd wake up before the 4:30 a.m. cleaning crews even arrived, head straight to the public restrooms to wash his clothes in the sink, and carefully shave. He maintained this immaculate appearance, while busy businessmen just rushed right past him. His diet? Equally rigid. Mostly, it consisted of a McDonald's Filet-O-Fish for lunch, and then another one for dinner. He spent his days reading discarded newspapers to teach himself French and German, and he wrote, constantly. Over 10,000. That is the estimated number of A4 diary pages he hoarded in cardboard boxes stacked all around his bench like a protective fortress. He wrote frantically on both sides of every single page to document his surreal existence. Using paper that was donated by the airport doctor or sympathetic airline staff, he wrote down literally every single conversation he had. He was essentially acting as the star, the director, and the sole documentarian of his very own isolated reality show. His co-author Andrew Donkin, who later helped Nasseri publish his autobiography, recalled this genuinely mind-blowing moment. A suspicious package was found near Nasseri's bench, which triggered a massive active bomb scare. While hundreds of travelers are sprinting away in sheer panic and heavily armed police are cordoning off the area, they're even sending in a remote-controlled robot equipped with a miniature chainsaw to cut open the suitcase. Nasseri just sat there, completely unfazed. He absolutely refused to abandon his precious boxes of diary pages. He just watched the chaos unfold with the casual, slightly annoyed indifference of a local resident irritated by neighborhood construction. For him, it was literally just another Tuesday in his living room. It's never actually a bomb, he said. A tourist forgets their bag. Moving into Section 4, the man called Sir Alfred, the psychology of a lost identity. This bizarre mystery of his true identity is perhaps the most fascinating and definitely the most heartbreaking part of this entire saga. The deep psychological toll of his isolation eventually led him to completely fracture his own reality as a survival mechanism. It's like when reality becomes too painful to bear, the human mind just simply builds a new one. Over the years, he completely rejected his Iranian heritage and constructed this new, impenetrable persona. If airport authorities or journalists addressed him as Mehran, his given name, he'd just blankly ignore them. Apparently, after receiving a letter from British immigration authorities that accidentally started with the typo, "Dear Sir Alfred," his mind just completely latched onto it. He became absolutely convinced he had been knighted by the Queen. He started claiming his mother was a British aristocratic nurse, or sometimes Swedish, entirely erasing his real past as an Iranian political refugee. Then, in 1999, the ultimate tragedy struck. After years of fierce legal battling by this incredibly sympathetic French human rights lawyer, France finally offered him official refugee papers and the legal right to just walk out of the airport. His golden ticket was placed right there in front of him. Freedom was literally one signature away. But he refused to sign the documents. He refused because the papers were addressed to a man named Mehran and listed his nationality as Iranian. You see, signing them meant admitting he was an Iranian refugee, which would shatter that delicate British reality he built to survive the loneliness. In the end, he chose the red bench over reality. He wasn't some poster boy for a political cause. He was just a deeply complicated, highly institutionalized man searching for an identity that perhaps never truly existed. When a journalist gently asked him if he was furious about losing the best decades of his life trapped under artificial lights in a transit terminal, his response was heartbreakingly simple and completely devoid of bitterness. He said, "No angry. I just want to know who my parents are." He wasn't angry. He just wanted to belong somewhere to someone. Section 5, a final return home, the end of the journey. Ultimately, his health finally forced him out of his makeshift kingdom, bringing his story to an unexpected and, in a way, deeply poetic conclusion. By 2006, the poor air quality, the total lack of sunlight, and extreme isolation finally took a severe physical toll.
He was hospitalized, which effectively ended his continuous 18-year streak in the terminal. After recovering, he actually spent years living quietly in a Parisian homeless shelter, basically known to everyone simply as the guy who used to be in the airport. But then, in the fall of 2022, he mysteriously packs up his few belongings and returns to Charles de Gaulle. And the thing is, he didn't go back because he had to. He still had thousands of euros in his pockets from those movie rights. He went back because he wanted to. The airport had completely institutionalized him. He actively chose to spend his final weeks on Earth exactly where he felt he belonged, eventually passing away peacefully right there in Terminal 2F at the age of 77.
It brings up a truly haunting philosophical question that Nasseri's 18-year wait forces every single one of us to consider. Without our passports, our visas, our official government documents, how much of our core identity actually remains? And if you somehow manage to build a life, a rigid routine, and a true sense of self in arguably the most transient, temporary place on Earth, doesn't it eventually, beautifully, become your home?
If you want to keep unpacking the incredible, complicated true stories behind the world's most fascinating people, you know what to do. Subscribe StorySnap US right now. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.